Hi, this is Joe Walding, aka Boyne Bowhunter on the saddlehunter.com forum. I thought I'd put together a quick video on changes I made to my one-stick climbing equipment from between 2018 and 2019. Now the season's over, I've got time to try and make a little video, do some video shooting. So I thought I'd put some changes I made to try and quiet my system down out there. Again, I made the changes primarily to try and quiet things down. There was a lot of comments on the 2018 video of, you could hear that metallic clank for a long ways and things along that line. I agree, and I wanted to address some of those things. So I'll start with the changes I made to my climbing stick. They still have the same Hawk Helium, cut down, modified Hawk Helium with the cam cleat that I used all of 2018. I used it again in 2019, but I did make some changes to it. The first change I made was to try and quiet down the cam cleat. I don't know if you can see this, so I'll step up here. You can see that green wire that's in there. The reason I put that wire in there is these cleats have stops in them. And so it's aluminum cam cleat, and then it hits on a metal stop. So if I pull that wire out of the way and I release the cleat, you can hear that loud metallic clank. Well, that's not the two cleats hitting together. As you can see, that's just the cleat hitting the stop. By putting that wire in there, I keep the cleat from hitting the stop, and it doesn't make near as much noise when you pull the rope out. So that really quieted down the cam cleat action on those. So that was the first change I made. The second change I made to the stick was I went to a GM climbing aider with a zip tie installed in it. I did this based on a video put forward by a gentleman named SloMo on the forum here, and that really quieted things down a bit. If you'll remember last year I was using a long aider with a piece of plastic sleeve on the bottom, piece of plastic tube on the bottom. Well, I found when my boots were wet and I step on that plastic tube, it would squeak. So by doing this, all I've got is cloth. And the aider, or the zip tie that's inside there, holds it open for me to put my foot in. So it works pretty well. Thanks, SloMo, that was a great suggestion. The other thing that I didn't think about at the time, but really proved to be a little helpful for me, was when you put that aider on the bottom standoff, you're pulling straight down on the stick. So it's kind of hard if I balance that stick on the cam cleat as a fulcrum. If I'm pulling down, it's kind of hard to kick that stick out. When you put the aider on the top standoff, now you're above your fulcrum. It's pretty easy to kick that thing side to side just by getting off center a little bit. So if the standoffs aren't seated tight against the tree, it could kick out. So it's actually a little safer to have the shorter runner on there. So that worked out well for me all year. The other change I made to my setup, if you'll remember in 2018, I climbed off my long rappel rope and then hung off it and then rappelled off. So I never really had to transition between ropes. Well, what I found in 2018 was that rappel rope would get wet when it rained. The water runs down the trees, it gets funneled under the rappel rope, the whole length of the rope gets wet, and then here in Michigan, as you can see, it's pretty cold. That rope would freeze once it got wet. And I hunt remote. There's really no good way for me to dry my equipment, overnight. So climbing out, I could rappel on the frozen rope without too much trouble, but just rope management, trying to coil it up, get it straightened back out to rappel on. Once it was froze, it was very difficult to work with. So in order to alleviate that, I made 3 of these and I just rotated through them. So I made some short tethers that I climbed on and hung on, and when they were wet I just swapped them out for the next one. So I made 3 identical ones, short of this component, which I'll talk about here in a minute. I just swapped that between tethers. But the tether is essentially a 7-foot piece of Samson Predator rope with a distal hitch and a D-ring to tend it with. So the distal hitch works pretty well, and the D-ring works to let me free it up so I can move it when I need to make an adjustment. To attach it to the tree, I went to a threaded screw link. And the primary reason I did this was that link is narrow enough. When you climb one sticking, every time you step up on your stick, you get about 3 foot of slack. And occasionally, in fact, not just occasionally, pretty regularly, that slack would allow this link to drop down. Well, the metallic link I was using was big enough to slide by this distal hitch, and then it would bang off this carabiner and make a clank. With using this link, if that drops, it's just a piece of metal dropping onto the distal hitch. It makes no noise whatsoever. So I got rid of that clank altogether. The other change I made to my climbing system, and I put this in probably middle October I started climbing with this, is I added a case-in extra. This is commonly referred to as a screamer. I believe it's a 48-inch, 22 kilonewton solid runner, and then it's overlaid and sewn together in such a way that it becomes a safety measure if you fall on it. So it'll hold about 500 pounds just statically. So in that condition, it's just a static link, up to about 500 pounds. I put that on this, attached to it. If I were to fall and exceed that 500 pounds, the stitching that holds those loops together would progressively pull out and slow my descent. So I wouldn't have that sharp shock at the bottom. That slowing of the descent reduces your fall force dramatically. So that's the intent. It's not there for any reason other than just in case. So under my ordinary circumstances, that becomes just another safety measure just in case something were to go bad when I had slack in the system. Once I'm up in the tree, I put my bridge back, so I'm typically routed with my bridge in the extra for the climb. Once I get up in the tree, I attach in there, and then I can take the extra out. So that keeps my bridge a normal length or my tether a normal length, rather than having this long tether that I have to tie way up here. I can still tie my tether at eye level, and take this right out of the system. So I only use this when I'm going up the tree, but it's just a little measure of safety for just in case something bad happens going up. You know, if the stick were to fall off the tree while I was standing on it or something along that line, just to keep me from bouncing hard. Those are basically the changes I made to my climbing system between 2018 and 2019. Again, I did it primarily to try and quiet things down, but I also did it to try and keep myself from having to deal with a frozen rope all the time. By doing this, I could keep my rappel rope in my pouch, and it stayed there, stayed dry until I got ready to get down. I hook it to the tree. It's on the tree, maybe 5 minutes max. Never really gets wet. Just worked out better for me in the long run. And it was wet a lot this year. It really helped me out. Again, just some of the changes I made. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope this helps you out some, explains some of the things I've done a little bit. Thanks for watching. Be safe out there.